Hey everyone, it's Dr. D. So if you're thinking about how you can bring more math talk into your classroom, whether you're teaching online or on site, you're going to want to watch today's video with author Chris Luzniak, whose book, Up for Debate, shares best practices and best structures for bringing debate into the math classroom. And you're going to see video footage and evidence of students using all of the rich vocabulary, making sense of math, justifying their answer, and making an argument using claims and evidence. It's really fascinating. So get ready for our episode today of Teacher Prep with Chris Luzniak. All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Teacher Prep with Dr. D. And today I have a very special guest. His name is Chris Luzniak, and he is the author of Up for Debate. Chris, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Hi, everyone. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, and I love the work that you're doing and that we can bring this to our audience and they can think about their practices, not just in math, but across the curriculum, how they can bring debate and debate structures into their class. So before we start talking about math debates, I want you to answer the following question. It's just a little icebreaker. Tell us, what is one myth that you want to debunk about being a math teacher?
Ooh, I love it. I would say one myth I really want to debunk about just math in general is that math is not about answer getting. I think math is much more about patterns and arguments and just seeing how things work out, kind of like scientific method, like playing with things and trying things out. I want math teachers to get away from just getting kids to memorize this, find the answer, and just to explore. What do you notice? What do you wonder? What's the pattern here? And I think math is much more joyful that way, and students are much more engaged that way. Like my classroom management becomes easier because kids just want to come and play with math. Math is about play and trying things out until you start to understand the patterns underlying everything.
Excellent. I love it. And thinking, I like your thought about thinking like a scientist when it comes to approaching both teaching and learning of math. So what do you say to all the teachers out there that are saying, well, I'm just not a math person. This is just not my thing.
Well, first of all, everyone's a math person. We all deal with numbers in our life. We notice patterns and things in how we organize our day, our schedule, our work, and things like that. We're all thinking mathematically. We need to embrace it. And first of all, like demystify, like math is not some guy with a beard in a college office doing crazy abstract number theory stuff. Like math is about the real world and things, looking at graphs and data and charts, looking at percentages and things like that, and starting to make sense of the world around you with the help of numbers and shapes and things like that.
Right. I love that. And thinking about it as like a tool to really, help you in your life and not something that is completely detached, because obviously we live in a world with $17 trillion debt. It's all part of our culture. It's part of the decisions that we make, from deciding whether to go to a private school or community college, or we want to rent or own a home. These are all things that are part of our lives. So embrace and see the beauty.
Yes. And don't make these decisions just kind of randomly. I'm going to roll the dice and see what happens. Like, we can all understand these things. We can look into them. We can get help from people who might understand it a little bit more, but let's believe that we all can understand math at all levels and make sense of it in our lives.
Absolutely. So let's talk about math debates. And we're going to just start with a quick little clip from your video, which is on pbslearningmedia.org. And if you want to just give us a little bit of context about this particular video, I know we're going to watch it's a 9 through grades 13, and it's about coordinates, and it shows them engaged in a math debate. So tell us about this class.
Yeah, this is, I used to live in New York City, and I taught in New York City public schools for 8 or 9 years. And this is where I started developing this idea for debating in math class. And around that time is when the Common Core came out. So PBS was trying to film classrooms that were focusing on the Common Core Standards of Math Practice number 3, which is about constructing viable arguments and critiquing reasoning of others. So they filmed my classroom because we were debating math and making arguments. This is a pre-calculus class back in New York. This is like 7 or 8 years ago. I look so young in the video.
Don't you hate that?
They are, I know the students, if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I've seen this. They are talking about the unit circle and just like coordinates, like what's possible, like less than 1, bigger than 1, positive, negative, just kind of generally speaking about it and making some conjectures and then having some debates. So you'll see them standing and debating about math during some of the clip.
Let's do it.
Is that coordinates negative a and negative b is incorrect. And my warrant is that if you look at the circle like an XY coordinate plane, in order for AB to be correct, the black one, A would have to be negative. And if you flipped it over to the fourth quadrant over there, both of them can't be negative. Only one of them can be negative.
You see the kids, I understand it my way and I'm explaining it to you. And when you finally get it, I can see the look on your face when you get it. It makes me happy. This is normal human behavior.
You know how like with radiant, what's good, what's true on one side isn't true on the other side? When I explain something to somebody, I find myself defining a lot more things, really making sure that they understand what I'm trying to say. So then it also furthers my understanding as well.
Someone want to add on to that or counter that or something? Let me go to Ethan. I know when I first started doing debating in my classroom, I was terrified of letting go of the class, and then one day I just took a chance and let go.
My claim is that negative A and negative B is correct because they're using variables A and B, not actual numbers like negative.
There's a lot of listening to the previous person and adding on to it or adding a different argument to it.
So I think it's correct.
So let's go to Amber. And so that really forces them to listen to each other.
Basically, I understand what you're saying, Ethan, but you said if it's negative, then you agree with Ethan. But if it is positive, then she's correct because if you think about like the numbers, the x-axis over there is positive. So how can it be two negatives? Do you know what I mean?
It also gets them to look at each other instead of looking at me all the time for classroom discussions.
Basically, think about it like this. You're multiplying negative 1 times negative, let's say, 0.25. You get a positive number.
The shift in the Common Core I see is that.
So we'll just stop right there. That was amazing. Tell me about that. Tell me about how did you envision doing this this debate talk with your kiddos? I saw a lot of great evidence of them actually owning the math.
Thanks. Yes. Well, I started teaching in New York City public schools and teaching high school math, but I was also the speech and debate coach because I had done debate in high school and had coached it a little bit after. So I founded the team at my school in New York, and I loved the coaching because the students were so engaged in speech and debate. They wanted to stay for after school to learn about how the health system works and healthcare law. They want to learn about the war in Afghanistan, like all the taxes and things like that. So students were like dying to learn. They were engaged. They wanted to stick around. They were excited to learn and talk about what they were learning. And through the debating, they processed the information and started to understand on a deeper level. And so I saw all this wonderful stuff happening after school in debate, but it wasn't happening in my math class. I started off as a very typical math teacher, just kind of desks and rows, here's some worksheets, teaching math the way I was taught. And so I wanted to find a way to kind of merge those two worlds. How do I bring the excitement, the energy around debate into math class? So I started playing with some ideas. I went to various like PD workshops all around about student discourse and things like that. I want to give a shout out to Boston Debate League, had some good ideas that I borrowed from there. And I started to come up with this talking routine as you see students like standing up and saying things in a sentence frame,
Right.
And then creating some good debatable questions that I could pepper in my lessons here and there so that it wasn't just find the answer, but it was what do you think is the best approach to this? Or is this possible? And let's debate this. And so students, as one of them said, the one girl said in the video, as the more she explained it, the more she understood it, and the more she started to learn the topic.
Yeah, I mean, one of the students, I was like, wow, I could see her as a future lawyer because she was just so evidence-based, and the way that she articulated her thinking, wow, I was like, I could see her really trying to convince me, using evidence. And it's like, how can you argue with that, really? So it was just kind of magical to see the kids actually in those structures. And so you didn't have a background in debate. This was something that just kind of evolved based on your relationship with your students.
Yeah. I did a little speech and debate in high school, and then just started coaching it. And so just from doing it, I got better at it, and from coaching it, I got better at it. And then I started to merge it with my math class, and I started to it shifted both for me and my students, like the way we saw math. Like you're saying about students being a lawyer, like I was helping raise lawyers in my math classroom. And I think about math all the time. Like when we get to proofs, students are always proving things, but it's really just a set of arguments convincing us why these two triangles are congruent, or whatever it is you're trying to prove.
Right.
And so I'm trying to build towards that of like, how do we build humans in this crazy world we live in right now, where everyone listens to a quick soundbite and then makes up their mind. Like, how do we really build thoughtful arguments, do slow and careful reflection and research, and make a solid argument that really convinces each other? And how do we do that in math class, not just like in the humanities?
So I can see teachers listening and saying, wow, that sounds really interesting, but I don't even know how to get started with this. So what advice would you give? I know you got a great book out there, but, and convince us why we should read the book. Tell us about it.
Yeah. Let's see. The shortest way to say this. So I talk about two main things I have, like the sentence frame, which is very simple, just one sentence. You'll hear the student say my claim is, my warrant is, and I just keep repeating that. So giving them something to say really is like an on-ramp for students to join the conversation. For many students who feel like math is not their jam, they're not good at math, they're not math people, to invite them into the conversation and give them the sentence frame, which I always thought was a little bit more like elementary school focused, but it really worked. The one I created in my high school math classes, coupled with some good debate questions. And those, I can create debate questions all the time, and I challenge teachers all the time when I give talks. Give me any math question, and I can turn it into a debate question like that. And I've yet to be stumped. But that's because it's like a muscle for me now. I've done 10 years or so of creating debate questions. So an easy way to start, I tell math teachers all the time, just the website, which one doesn't belong, which just has 4 boxes of numbers or graphs or equations or whatever, and you have to talk about why one of them doesn't belong because it's different than the other 3 for some reason. And those are there's ones already pre-made on the website. You can steal from there. And it's just a nice open-ended question that there's really no right answer to. Each one could have a reason why it doesn't belong, but you're getting students to start joining the conversation. They're using good math vocabulary, hopefully, in their arguments. And I start class like that at the beginning of the year, just like a 5-minute warm-up, which one doesn't belong, tell your partner, tell the whole class, however I want to do it. But I'm starting the year and starting class as often as I can with some debate and discourse routine, so that it becomes a habit for the students.
Right. And so is this a daily routine that you're doing, or maybe just once a week? What does the structure look like?
I would say it's in my class some way every day at this point. That's only because I've done it so much. I always tell the story when I first started. I was so nervous to have students debating in math class and to kind of let go of the control of the class. So I spent 2 months, the first time I did this in the beginning of the school year, preparing for a 5-minute warm-up where I was going to let students do a quick which one doesn't belong type debate. And so I spent 2 minutes preparing mentally for this, making sure I knew what my routines were going to be, how I was going to handle a student, I don't know, talking on a turn or something like that, all the backup plans. I did it for 5 minutes, then went back to my normal teaching, and then waited another 2 months to do it again. So my first year was very slow, just trying it out, little bits and pieces. But now that I'm comfortable, it's daily in some way. I would say at least once or twice a week, I do it as the warm-up, where students are vocally sharing things out. But other days, it's in written form, on this Google Doc or in the chat box. Can you type something, an argument for this? Or on a quiz or test even, some of the questions are, is this possible? Always, sometimes, or never. Convince me.
Right. I love it. So you're building in kind of multiple forms of expression. So maybe in one instance, it's a debate that's, you know, students just like on the fly, using the language, working in real time. Then, and maybe in another instant, it's part of their warm up where they're writing a response. So it's like you're giving them these different ways to express and convince and make an argument and justify their thinking, which are all wonderful standards for mathematical practice. It's all there. And you've just put it into your classroom structures so that students are building efficacy for it. And tell me about that, because my curiosity is, these are great things. I love them. I love the idea of math talk. And I love, and I didn't know this, but I love that you're kind of building it through different expressions. But tell me what you noticed as a result. Like, what have you noticed about your students when debate is part of these structures?
Oh, yeah, so much. I've been reading one of the books I read this summer about brain science, talked about priming the brain, and like how you start a class or start a meeting or whatever can kind of set up the brains of your audience for like what's going to happen for the next half hour, 45 minutes, hour, whatever it is. And they talked specifically about like if you start with like discourse, students or your audience will be talking throughout the session. They're primed for talking.
Yeah.
If you start with debate, they're primed for critical thinking and analyzing information as they go through. So I was like, great, that just backs up my plan already of what I'm doing. So I think just starting with something for 5 minutes that involves talking, and even just like pair share, go into breakout rooms of 3 or something. Now that we're on Zoom, just talk with some people just quickly about this. I also, another resource I love is the New York Times has a what's going on in this graph, where they take a graph from a recent article, but kind of take the article away and just kind of analyze the graph. Just notice and wonder about it. Just like having kids take 5 minutes to just start discussing something math-ish,
right,
real world-ish or whatever, spills over into my classroom in so many ways. So whenever I'm asking for, what do you think I would do next? Or, what do you think the answer is for this? Or can someone share what they got on problem number 7? Students are more open. Their brain is already ready to start talking, and they just jump in. Even on Zoom, which I have a lot of screens off or cameras off, students are happy to turn the camera on and just quickly share out something because they've already gotten a little bit of a pattern of talking from the warm-up.
Great.
So that's a huge benefit that I have more student voice in the classroom. And I really feel over time as I do it, I've invited all students into the math classroom, and I really have shown them I believe all of their voices matter. All of them have opinions and ideas that are worthy of being shared. And so even my shy students, English language learners, students who think they're not good at math or whatever, have moments where they can speak up and they feel like they've achieved something this day, this week, this month, at least as in little bits here and there. They're having successes in math class.
So speaking about diverse learners, what recommendations do you have for teachers out there that maybe they have a student with an IEP for speech and language, right? So already the students might have this, mindset that they just can't do it. Or maybe they have a student that has very limited English proficiency. They're an English language learner that's only been new to the country for, maybe less than a year. What have you found that's worked to kind of support those kiddos in the classroom with debates?
Yeah, what I will say now is like a variety of things that many teachers across subjects use. I like think time or write time often when I do debate, especially at the beginning of the year. I'm startling kids with, hey, we're going to debate in math class, and some of them have never really spoken up in math class before. It's like, what are you doing? So take 30 seconds to write down your argument, or just to think about it in your mind and mentally write it down. Often I will say chat with a partner first. If I feel students are not eager to volunteer themselves, sometimes you get the room or you've had them for a few weeks and like, oh, this class is dying to share out and I don't need to do partner share first, but just do a quick pair share with your partner or with your group for like 2 minutes. And I can walk around the room and listen for some good arguments or some confusing arguments. And I can even ask students as I'm floating around, like, hey, would you mind if I call on you to share that? So that gives them a little bit of time preparation. And like I said, sometimes I just do things in writing. I'll put it all in the same Google Doc or a Desmos activity or a Padlet or something. It doesn't always have to be spoken, so that gives students more time. And like I said, also it's a routine. And so the more I do it, the more students become comfortable with it.
Right. And that's a big thing too. And I think too often as teachers, we might have this great idea and then maybe try it once or twice and say, well, that just didn't work for my kiddos. But actually the research shows that you need at least 20 instances to make it effective. So I think too often we get into this frame of mind, it's just not going to work, right? Well, yeah, maybe the first time I did crunches, I'm not going to see any definition, but 30-day challenge, that would work, right?
Yeah, and even when I start teaching the students the routine the first week of school, my questions are, what's the best movie or TV show? Who's the best musician? Like, I just want to hear their opinions and get the routine down without the math anxiety coupled with it. So, like, let's get the routine down 2 or 3 times, and then let's start to slide in some math with it because they already have a routine that's a little bit more comfortable for them.
Right. I love it. I think that's a great idea, kind of having those questions that kind of have a low floor, you know, like, hey, and then moving up, increasing the cognitive demand once, you know, students have gotten some of those key structures in place. I recommend that with people with technology all the time is like, don't layer the technology that's brand new onto the content knowledge. It's just kind of cognitive overload. But let's take a look. I love your website. I found so many amazing things that you've already put on your site to help facilitate debates. Walk me. Let's just say I'm a brand new teacher. I found this on your site, luzniak.com, and I'm teaching dividing fractions. What advice, or how would you plan for this? What advice would you give to this brand new teacher, how they should plan for using this in a class?
Great question.
This is what I do.
Yeah. So I would say one of the favorite resources on my website, and I think it's under debate math, there's something called debate cards.
Right.
And they're meant for like pairs. If you had a problem in front of you and like one side says, you know, I should, let's say for fractions, I should get common denominators first. And the other side says, you know, I should make a visual model first or something. I don't know what the two sides would be.
Right.
But there's examples from not just me, but from other teachers across the country and beyond who have made some from Australia, Canada. And I just add them up there as people make them. But they're just great questions you can pull and say, with your partner, someone be partner A, and you have to argue that this is the best way, and someone be partner B, and you have to argue the other side is the correct way to do it, or the best way to do it. So those are some great, just easy go-to resources. And then I have like larger debates that I build up to as like a project or something in the spring semester that are scattered on there and on my blog and places like that.
So I see this like under this particular problem, you have 4/10 divided by 1/2. And then it says change this into a multiplication problem is the best method. And then above it, it says solve this with division is the best method. So they choose which one to debate. Is that what happens?
Yeah, I would say like I would make one statement, like the first thing you said about change it into multiplication is like that's statement A, and use it as division statement B. And so there's a partner A and a partner B. And so partner A has to argue for the A side, no matter what their personal feelings are. So that also alleviates some of the stress because like I'm making them force a certain argument. So it's not necessarily their opinion, but can they make an argument for their side A or side B?
Right. Okay. So all of these would be side A or side B.
Yeah.
Okay. And so do I get to choose? Like I love the visual one here. I want to work on this problem, or do we do one routine at a time to build understanding of dividing fractions?
It really depends on your class, your students, what your objectives are as a teacher. You can do all kinds of things. I often do them like as a warm up, just like one of them on PowerPoint, like on my screen, and students, just like the person on the left has to do side A and the person on the right has to argue side B or something like that. Just talk with your partner about this. And then maybe I'll pick a couple people to share out. Some people actually make like a stack of cards between the pairs and they flip through them. And
okay. I love this because I'm a big fan of Van de Waal. And he always talks about the 5 representations of math. And so I see it here is the visual, and then you're talking about real life with making their own story, which is so critical. And then just looking at the here between using multiplication and division, which are different strategies to solve dividing fractions. So you've kind of done it all in these cards.
Yes, and I get to hear from students. Like students hear from each other. They learn from each other about what those different representations are and what their strengths are or weaknesses are, and they can, as they're talking about it, they're not just hearing something from me. I've decentered myself as the expert in the room. They're learning from each other, and they're seeing the importance of collaboration and discourse in their learning as part of their learning.
Absolutely. So you kind of already talked about what you're doing because you're teaching remotely online, but maybe just kind of in a nutshell, give us your favorite recommendations for bringing debate routines into online learning.
Yeah, it's not easy. I'm such a social person, and I like being social in person. It's hard on Zoom. But I mean, the easiest thing is breakout rooms. Zoom at my school, so I can send kids into breakout rooms, and I will even set them as a timer, just like 2 minutes tops. Like you have to quickly get in, say your argument, listen to your partner's argument, and come back out. I often use the chat instead of students sharing out, just because of Wi-Fi connectivity issues, and students don't always want to unmute or turn on their cameras. We use the chat a lot. My friend Ed Campos calls it chat waterfall, where everyone types in the chat but don't send yet, and then when I say go, we all send at the same time so we can read everyone's argument all at once. I like that a lot because it keeps it from one student sends something and everyone's like, oh, that's what I was going to say, I'll just not respond. So like we all load our information in the chat but don't send, and then when I say go, we all send at the same time.
Right.
Take a minute, everyone, just to read over some of those arguments and what questions do you have, or pull out some things to talk about.
And then you're giving those accommodations. They get wait time. It isn't necessarily a competitive structure where it's like, oh, I know John is like always going to get the answer first and correct. I'll just copy whatever John says, you know.
Yep.
I definitely fell into that trap.
Yeah, my favorite thing when they're to record things, for accountability reasons, when they're in breakout rooms, is just to give each breakout room a Google slide on like one giant set of slides. Right. Recording whatever they want, typing in whatever they want, or drawing whatever they want. I know people use Jamboard for the same reason, but just giving, and I like it because they're all in the same document. It's easy for me to look back at, but also if they get stuck, they can like go up a slide and see what the other groups are doing and then come back to their own slide. So I like that visibility across the breakout rooms. Mm-hmm. For them.
Awesome. So my last question is, because I work with all teachers, single subject, English, art, music, you got it, I have it in my classroom. Convince me why single subject teachers, or teachers that are identified as non-math teachers, should bring debates into their classroom, and what recommendations do you have for, say, an English teacher or social studies to do that?
Yeah, I don't get that question a lot because a lot of English and social studies teachers already have some kind of discourse and debate routines often. And a lot of what I have, I've adapted from things I've observed in humanities classrooms. But the number one reason for debate is students have tons of opinions, especially teenagers, middle school, high school. They have tons to say, and I want to honor what they say. But I also want to teach them to make solid arguments. I think we live in a very country right now, like politically, and people are not listening to each other. Mm-hmm. I want to build those skills of listening and empathy, so that students understand the importance of not just like jumping to conclusions and really being convincing, and understand what it's like to actually convince someone of something, whatever the topic may be. And so I think all subjects, it's really important for students to get those skills for debate. And it's not about winning. It's about like, can you really listen? Can you understand? Can you recognize a good debate? Can you be critical about your own argument and improve it in some way? Like, how can you be clearer or more convincing? I think those are those human skills that I really, really, really want students to walk away from in my math class. And I love when other classes do it too.
I love it. I think that's so important. You talked about those human skills, and we do live in a time where politically, religiously, whatever you want to call it, it seems like people are at opposite ends. And I mean, I've heard stories about people defriending their own family members on Facebook and things like that. It's really sad. And it's like, can we just learn how to listen to each other? And when we do argue, can we do it through a lens of maybe looking at whatever evidence and maybe being a little bit more open-minded to other people's opinions. So education is such a wonderful vehicle to teach those soft skills, right?
Yes, and I feel it's really imperative in this climate that we live in right now to build those soft skills in our students more than just the quadratic formula or whatever math content. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for coming on our show. We got your book up for debate. How else can our listeners hear from you or learn about what you're doing?
Yeah, the two easiest things are my website, just luzniak.com, Luzniak, or my Twitter handle is CLuzniak, CLuzniak. I'm on Twitter. I haven't been on the social media stuff as much this year, but I only tweet with teachers and talk to teachers about education and share ideas. I feel like on Zoom teaching, I've been on screen too much, and I've been less on Twitter this year than past years. But I used to be on it a lot, and I will come back to it more in the coming months.
Get ready to be tweeted, because I'm going to be tweeting out the show.
I love to have conversations, and so much of my work has come from me trying things out and putting it out there on Twitter and wondering what people think about it, or people trying things in their classroom and sharing it with me on Twitter and be like, oh, I'm like, that's a great idea. Can I keep sharing that forward? And so it's a great community of people who want to just pay it forward and keep sharing, because this job is hard, and let's just keep working together to create good, classroom ideas.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, and I hope to have you back on the show soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.